It's being called one of the most powerful earthquakes to have hit Turkey in nearly a century. Felt by millions of people from as far away as Israel, the quake's epicenter was located in southern Turkey. Dozens of aftershocks have followed. Major cities affected include Kahramanmaraş, Adana, Malatya, Gaziantep, and Diyarbakır, where thousands of buildings have been destroyed. Rescuers are also battling harsh weather conditions as freezing temperatures make life difficult for survivors too afraid to return home. Turkey's Disaster and Emergency Management Authority, AFAD, said the 7.7 magnitude quake struck at 4:17 a.m. local time at a depth of 7 kilometers in the Pazarcık district. The initial quake was followed by powerful aftershocks, with several measuring over 6 in Gaziantep, a city of 2 million. The death toll for Turkey and Syria stands at over 1,500 and is expected to climb in the coming days. International support is already pouring in, with several EU countries dispatching rescue teams to search for survivors. And for more on the Turkey's rescue and recovery efforts, I'm joined by Ali Pınar. He is a seismologist at Kandilli Earthquake Research Center at Boğaziçi University in Istanbul. Also by Kaan Saner, the Director of Policy and Partnerships at the Turkish Red Crescent, and Tim Wright. He is a professor at the School of Earth and Environment at the University of Leeds. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk, and thanks for joining me on this very sad day. So, Ali, Turkey's southeast has been rocked by a devastating earthquake measuring 7.7 on the Richter scale. How devastating is the situation, you think?
Today we have experienced two major earthquakes of magnitude close to 7.7, and it is really very rare situation to have such two major earthquakes very close in time and space. The time difference between the two events was about 9 hours, and the distance between the two events is really very close to each other. This the close space between the two events is probably here the event triggering probably occurred, but as we know, the region is really experiencing strain accumulation because of the northward moving of the African plate and the Arabian plates. And when we look at the focal mechanism of the two events, we can clearly see that the stress regime between the two events is really very different. The last event, the stress orientation of the last event is nearly northwest southeast. But the first that occurred this morning, we can see that the compressional stress is nearly in north-south direction. This clearly indicates that in this region, the northward motion of the African plate and in the northward motion of the Arabian plates really were effective in strain accumulation along the faults that were ruptured today with, with earthquakes.
So, Tim, I'm sure you've been following what's been happening in Turkey. What do you see? How does the situation like from where you are? I mean, they say it is one of the most powerful earthquakes Turkey has seen in decades.
Yes, it's really horrific. I think what we're seeing, that the news footage you're showing there, and my deepest sympathies and thoughts go out to everyone impacted by this earthquake and this pair of large earthquakes we've had now in the last few hours. It's in terms of the scale of this, the last time we had an earthquake bigger than this in Turkey was 1939, and the last time we've had earthquakes anything like this size were in 1999, when there were two very large earthquakes that affected the area around Izmit, Kocaeli, on the North Anatolian Fault. But this is a really very, very large earthquake. And just to put it in context, just from that initial large event, that was probably about 2.5 times larger than the 1999 earthquake that was so devastating in the Izmit Kocaeli earthquake. So really very, very dramatic and significant events that unfortunately look like they've caused incredibly widespread devastation.
Yeah. So, Kaan, the earthquake centered in Kahramanmaraş has jolted 10 other provinces, causing heavy damage and, of course, casualties. What do you think, and how do you think the search and rescue efforts are being carried out? What are the challenges right now?
It's, of course, the search and rescue work is not in our mandate, but of course, we are standing with our search and rescue teams for backup support. But the factors, making it difficult for the search and rescue teams is the weather conditions over there. I mean, also it is hampering our efforts to address the need on the ground because, it happened during night, and also the freezing weather conditions are affecting people, in many aspects.
So, Ali, you've talked about the fault lines, but how has the relatively shallow depth of the quake made things worse in terms of casualties and physical damage?
Yeah, when we talk about the depth of the earthquake, we should distinguish the initiation of the rupture and the depth of the seismogenic thickness in the region. Today, the seismology department of Kandilli and Afad announced that the depth is around 7 kilometers. But we shouldn't think that the major moment release or the major energy release was not at depth of 7 kilometers, but rather during these major earthquakes, the whole seismogenic thickness, which should be around 15 to 20 kilometers, was ruptured. I mean, the earth crust from the top of the earth to the depth of 20 kilometers was ruptured along a fault that is probably extending more than 200 kilometers and probably reach about a fault rupture of 300 kilometers. That's why I can say that the depth is not 7 kilometers, but these two major events ruptured the whole crust from the surface to the thickness of to the depth of the seismogenic crust.
So, Tim, experts like yourself say area is prone to earthquakes and it lies at an intersection point of 4 major fault lines. So, are we likely to see further tremors?
Firstly, just to echo what Dr. Pinar says, and thank him and his organization for the fantastic monitoring data that they produce. Yes, this is a region where we will expect further earthquakes. And when you have a big earthquake, there are always many, many aftershocks. And sometimes we trigger additional large earthquakes, as seems to have occurred today, unfortunately. So yes, we're going to expect many, many tremors, some of which will be quite large earthquakes in their own rights, and they will continue for many months. And this is going to be a region impacted by those aftershocks, and that is going to impact the rescue effort as well, unfortunately.
So, Kaan, rescuers are, as you've mentioned, battling harsh weather conditions as freezing temperatures make life difficult for survivors. So how is bad weather conditions and snow hindering the rescue efforts? What should be done?
Firstly, the people affected should be protected very soon, and we mobilize our efforts as a society. We dispatch hundreds of thousands of blankets to the region for people to protect themselves against these harsh weather conditions. Of course, many people prefer to stand by the demolished houses and wait for loved ones to be rescued. So that's why the psychological impact also is a huge one on the people. So it is making difficult for search and rescue teams while the loved ones are waiting next to the demolished houses. So we are also using our psychosocial teams at least to ease the human suffering to a considerable extent when consider the psychological impact on the family of those under the debris.
But what is needed the most at the moment, do you think?
Turkish Red Crescent Society is very much addressing the basic needs. First of all, basic needs are blankets, non-food items, hygiene items, and also food items. We have soup kitchens in the region, and we have at least 6 soup kitchens operational in the affected areas to serve meals to those in need. And also, as I said, we have distributing. I mean, we have blankets to those in need in the affected in the distribution points. So these are the first initial stage of response, and also we are going to launch another stage by providing shelters. Of course, the shelter can be provided in the form of tents or collective shelters. As you know, I mean, people can be sheltered in in government public houses collectively as well. So we are looking for 2 alternatives together with our National Disaster Management Agency.
Yes.
But Turkey Crescent is mainly responsible for the provision of food as a cluster leader in the disaster management system of Turkey. Now we are heavily engaged in these at this stage.
So, Ali, how difficult do you think is it to coordinate search and rescue operations in 10 different provinces? Does Turkey have enough manpower and expertise to deal with the devastation?
Yeah, although it is not my subject, but from the previous major earthquakes, we know that there are really a huge number of rescue teams that were very efficient in saving lives under the collapsed buildings. And of course, we need international help also. I mean, if we have a sufficient number of rescue teams, probably the number of the saved lives would be much higher. That's why, especially during these cold winter times, if we have more rescue teams, then it would be really efficient in saving life of the people who are under the collapsed buildings.
So, Team Turkey has declared a 4th level emergency, its highest, and asked for international assistance through the European Union's Emergency Response Coordination Center. What does this tell us about the seriousness of the situation?
I think it's clearly a very serious situation. It's what you're seeing from the footage, but it was very clear from the moment the seismic waves were mapped within minutes of the earthquake how devastating this event is likely to have been. We know from previous earthquakes in the region, even much smaller earthquakes have done a lot of damage, and so an earthquake of this scale would cause widespread devastation in many countries. And I think, unfortunately, there are going to be buildings here that have not been built necessarily to the appropriately to withstand an earthquake of this kind of size. It's a challenge to build buildings that can stand this kind of shaking. It really is severe. I can't stress enough how big and devastating an event this is. It's really, it's so horrific looking at the pictures you're showing on the screen.
Unfortunately, Kaan, we've seen pictures of damaged highway in Hatay, and several airports have also been destroyed. So how will that hinder the efforts to get rescue equipment and supplies to the affected areas?
The response authorities are, including Turkish Red Crescent Society, are using different alternative channels. For example, we are dispatching relief items by air and road. Yes, there are some. There are some roads sustaining damage, but there are other alternative roads which are open, and the road construction agency is working hard to ensure uninterrupted transportation during these response operations. Of course, it's a disaster affecting more than 10 cities. So these necessitate extra efforts to maintain transport network open. But we are using different alternatives now.
Like what?
For example, there is an airport in Adana, Gaziantep, and we have logistics centers there, deployed there. And we are also dispatching relief items from these areas, by adopting hybrid approach. Whereby we are using air and road together, especially to the affected areas, targeted areas.
Because we hear international support is already pouring in, not as you as a person, but of course, how are you or how is Turkey planning to coordinate all these incoming assistance from abroad?
I mean, as a disaster-prone country, we have a lot of experience in this field. We have a coordination cell within the body of National Disaster Management Agency. Now they are coordinating international assistance with the reception centers at airports and point of entries in Turkish borders. So they are in close contact with foreign humanitarian assistance and search and rescue unit, and also I'm talking about state-to-state relief mechanism. Also, it's channeled through European Union and United Nations. So these multilateral channels have its own coordination mechanisms. And we have Red Crescent Society. We are part of Red Cross Red Crescent movement. Our center in Geneva also is coordinating international assistance. Now we are appealing state. We are, finalizing our need assessment, and we are going to inform these need to the international centers for appeal. But of course, we have contingent stocks on our hand from different centers, and our partners are ready to respond as well. But this one should will be rather complementary nature.
So, Ali, we've been seeing some aftershocks. How do you think they have added to the already devastation, and are we likely to see them continue?
Yeah, the major earthquakes of this size, the aftershock may continue several months, and the largest aftershock may reach magnitude above 6, and that's why especially those strong aftershocks may affect especially the buildings that were slightly damaged by the major shocks. I mean, we shouldn't consider that the slightly damaged buildings are safe, because a strong aftershock may influence those buildings, and even they may result in collapse because of the strong aftershocks. That's why at least a few months we should take care of the aftershock monitorings, especially careful monitoring of the aftershocks, and also combining the aftershock location with the rupture process or rupture analysis of the main shock would provide very valuable information, especially the initial analysis indicates that the first earthquake ruptured a fault length of about 300 kilometers, but the seismic energy release was not smooth along these 300 kilometer source area. We can observe that in some area, probably some segment were left unbroken, and in such area we should we should carefully observe such unbroken fault segment, because if those faults, if a stress increase occur on such unbroken fault segments, they may result also in a very large aftershocks.
So, Tim, how do you see the situation? I mean, Ali just mentioned there are some unbroken fault lines. How dangerous is this situation, and what should people do to prevent further destruction and loss of lives?
Yeah, I think Ali is absolutely right. And one of the bits of scientific data that will come in over the next few days is mapping of exactly what happened in this event using satellite technology. And we should be able to see, when combined with the seismology, the seismic waves that experts like Ali used to analyze the earthquake, by combining that with satellite observations, we'll be able to see exactly which bits of fault broke, which bits have less slip, which bits have more slip, build models that tell us exactly what happened and can help us think about the areas that are most likely to be at risk from future earthquakes. I think in terms of immediate action, I think I just echo what everyone else has said already, that just because a building didn't collapse does not mean it's safe. There needs to be very detailed structural investigations of probably almost every building in the vicinity of the rupture before it's determined whether these are safe. So that is going to require a huge humanitarian effort in ensuring people can survive in the winter conditions outside some of these buildings. We are going to get further earthquakes. There probably will be further building collapses, sadly. And so just urge people to take all the precautions that they can. But of course, it's very harsh conditions at this time of year as well to be not living inside.
So you both talked about the importance of mapping after this earthquake. But Ali, I really wonder, isn't there an early warning system placed in the region since it sits on a very critical geography?
Yeah, actually, I should say that in the region, and especially in Turkey, the number of seismic stations operated by Kandilli in Afat is above 1,000, and the station spacing there should be less than 50 kilometers. And in such spacing, we don't have a early warning system, but we apply automatic earthquake location algorithms. And both Kandilli seismic network and Afat seismic network use such automatic earthquake location system. And especially in the area where the seismic stations are dense, we can estimate the location and the size of the earthquakes in a couple of seconds. And such systems can be considered as early warning system because both Kandilli and Afat automatically locate the events and they immediately release the location and the size of the earthquakes in their webpage. And people who are interested in receiving early warning information, they can monitor the webpage of Afat or the webpage of Kandilli, where the automatic location are distributed and open to everybody.
Yes.
And that automatic location can be considered as earthquake early warning system. But the problem is how far is the buildings to the fault? Because if you are maybe closer than say 30 kilometers, then there is no time for early warning issuing.
Yes.
Because we need at least 5-6 stations to locate and estimate the size of the earthquake. And we call a blind zone, which radius about 30 kilometers.
Yes.
And if the city is very close, then it is not possible to. There is no time for early warning.
All right. So, Kaan, just
yeah,
quick.
If I can maybe add in and just add an additional point on that. I mean, Ali's absolutely right. And just to be clear, what we mean by early warning is this is when the earthquake has already started. And so you're trying to then warn people before the seismic waves hit them. And you can do that, if, as Ali said, if you're further than a certain distance away. But actually, we're not talking about earthquake prediction, which we generally think is impossible, probably, unfortunately, in terms of providing warnings of hours or days before an event. So even if there'd been an early warning here, it's hard to, of a few seconds. That might be useful for shutting down nuclear power stations or slowing trains down and things like that. And that's used very widely in places like Japan. but it's not going to probably be enough time for people to evacuate some of these buildings, particularly if the earthquakes are happening at night.
All right, at least, I mean, I want to thank you at least for bringing clarity on that and early warning system. We'll have to leave it here, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.